Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started if everybody is ready. So good evening. My name is Jared Kerr. I'm with Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I want to welcome everyone to this meeting to discuss Balls Hill Road and Old Dominion Drive intersection. Before we begin, I'd like to review some guidelines so that everyone can participate in the meeting and get the most out of it as possible. Please note this meeting is being recorded and we will post it on YouTube, and then there will be a link from the project webpage so that everybody can access the meeting or watch it after the fact. And for those of you that wish, Microsoft Teams offers a live captioning service. So if you click on the three dots that say more probably up at the top right hand of your screen, you can then you can go down and choose to turn on live captioning for anybody that would wish to do that. All right, so once the presentation is completed, then we'll go into question and answer portion. During that portion, participants can ask their questions aloud, and we will enable the whoever raises their hand will enable. We'll go over that a little bit later. And then we have disabled the chat feature for this meeting, so we will only be taking verbal questions. We won't be taking written questions. And if you're on the phone, please hold your questions to the end, and then we will have instructions later on how to do that. So I will introduce Supervisor John Faust and see if he is interested in providing some opening comments before we get started with the presentation.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I actually don't have a lot to say at this time. I'm more anxious to hear hear the presentation and hear the comments from the attendees. I do want to thank Fairfax County Department of Transportation. This is a hugely significant project for our community that will address, really one of the worst intersections we have with the phased lighting and really almost unacceptable delay that we experience some days at that intersection. It's an expensive project and it's a complicated project, and we've got some really good people working to achieve a solution that's going to, I think, generally improve the quality of getting around McLean when it's done. So I thank you, FDOT, and thank everyone who's joining us. We need your input as we try to reach some final decisions on how to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so tonight's meeting is on Balls Hill Road and Old Dominion Drive intersection improvements. This is the first of two meetings. Our first meeting is tonight, right now. Our second meeting will be next week, June 30th. That's next Thursday, and it will be at Churchill Elementary School. So we will have a little more presentation material. We'll have an open house beforehand at 6:30 so that people could come in and review some plan sheets, and they will be able to review some roll plots and stuff, which makes it easier to do it in a in-person setting. So we hope that you all join us for that one as well. Right. So we're going to run through the meeting agenda real quick here. So we'll do introductions so that everybody can get a feeling for the team, and they'll know who all is working on the project. And then we'll do a project overview. We'll run through the recommended alternative, the proposed intersection design, the walkway connections, what proposed walkways we have and how they're tying to existing walkways. And then we'll do traffic analysis, land acquisition, tree impacts, utility relocations, anticipated schedule, and then we'll open it up for public comments and questions. So I am Jared Kerr. I'm the project manager. I work for Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I work in the Transportation Design Division. Our utility coordinator is Tan Nguyen, who happens to not be here this evening. He couldn't make it. My direct boss is Brooke Corsciati. She is the section chief for the Transportation Design Division. She also is unable to attend this meeting this evening. And then we have Todd Minix, who is the chief of the Transportation Design Division. He is here this evening. And we also have the director of Fairfax County Department of Transportation, Tom Bashadny, is here with us as well. And then we have from Rinker Design Associates, also known as RDA. They are the roadway transportation engineers. They're the ones doing the design for us. We have Adam Welschenbach, who is the transportation engineer, the project manager on the consultant side. And not listed here, but also just as important, we have Nikhil Deshpande, who is the hydraulics engineer, and he deals with when it rains where the rainwater goes. So he's doing the stormwater management ponds and the drainage design. And then we also have with us from Kimley Horn, they are the transportation and traffic analysis engineers. We have Andy Smith and Jeff Giffen, and they are focused on the signal design and the traffic analysis associated with the project. All right, so when you look at this picture right here, it's kind of hard to see, but this is just a representation of what we have shown in the past. And we have selected the board had approved in December of 2018, alternative A1T intersection design. It's not the easiest to read here, so we'll shift over to a picture that has a little better layout. So what this has done is it's rotated at 90 degrees. So Old Dominion Drive is running across the horizontal section here. And then the Balls Hill realigned section is on the top and the bottom of the sheets that connect. So for those of you that are watching virtually, this section up here to the left where my mouse is Balls Hill, and it's going to realign. And then this section down here to the south is also Balls Hill, where it's going to realign. So we're going to have 2 T intersections with proposed signals at each of those intersections. The reason that this option was selected is because it makes the intersection smaller. So right now with one intersection, you have a pretty big, wide open intersection. So realigning them to 2 intersections makes it a much smaller intersection, and it makes it easier for drivers to navigate because there's not as much confusion. The roads are going to be aligned better and they'll be signed better. So for those of you that drive this road every day, I'm sure you know where Balls Hill and where Old Dominion Drive are. But for the people that don't drive this every day, when it's realigned, it'll be much easier for them to run through without confusion. I think it's important to note that Old Dominion Drive is posted at 40 miles an hour up until the intersection, the existing intersection, and then it changes to 35 as it comes into McLean. And Balls Hill Road is 35 all the way through, and we propose to keep it the same way, same speeds throughout. One of the things associated with this project is going to be walkway connections. So as you look at this screen, the dashed red lines are where there are existing walkways. So if you look at the left and the right, we have existing walkways, and in the middle, the white dashed line is where we are going to connect the walkways. So we're going to propose walkways from Churchill Road, which connects into existing walkway, all the way through the project, through the newly realigned intersection, and it will tie in, it'll cross over on the north side, it'll run up and it'll cross over at the second or easternmost walkway intersection realignment. It'll cross over to the south, and then it'll connect to the existing walkway that's on the other side of Van Ness. On the south side of the project, or the south side of Old Dominion Drive, we're going to start a new walkway at the beginning of our project, which is the beginning of the property at 7201 Old Dominion Drive. And we will continue that walkway all the way up to the Van Ness, and then we will also run a piece of the walkway down the realigned Balls Hill Road and tie into the existing asphalt trail that is just down Balls Hill a little way. The purpose behind this is over north and west. We have Churchill Elementary School, and then that will provide connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, all the way through the project, all the way up to the elementary school. And I believe Cooper Elementary School is up there as well. So we will provide better connectivity through the project once the project is done. So to go into a little more detail about what the walkways are going to look like, we have here, this is what we call a typical section. And this basically shows that you have a 5-foot concrete sidewalk is what we're going to propose through this area. And it's going to have a 1-foot graded area, a flat graded area on either side of the walkway. That's what we generally call a shoulder. And then that's where the proposed right-of-way would be if we need proposed right-of-way. Now, most of the right-of-way in this section is a little bit further back. So if we do decide that we need to acquire right-of-way, it'll be 1 foot back behind that sidewalk. But in some situations, it's a little bit further because the existing walkway or the existing right-of-way is already further back. So we might not need to acquire right-of-way if the walkway is going to be within the existing right-of-way. We will have a buffer between the sidewalk and the existing roadway in this section. We are not proposing to put concrete curb and gutter up against the section of road between Churchill and Elizabeth Drive, and Matthews Mills Drive. It's going to be an offset sidewalk. So what that means is in some areas, it might meander a little more than 5 or 6 feet from the road, and it might be a little bit closer. It just depends on what type of facilities are out there, if we need to minimize impacts to utilities or trees or something else of that nature. The section that we are looking at right here is kind of the main section of the project. It's from Elizabeth Drive down to the reconnected intersection and then through to the other. So it focuses on the 2 realigned intersections and the segment of road between that. So here up on Balls Hill, adjacent to Balls Hill from Elizabeth Drive, running back along that first property, we are proposing to put what we call a curb abutted sidewalk. So there will not be a green space from the back of the curb to the sidewalk. It'll just be all sidewalk, and it'll be 6 foot. And the reason we are proposing that is because there is a driveway right here, and if we went any further, we would be into that driveway. So we want to minimize the impacts there. So when you see this pink sidewalk area here, that is the curb abutted sidewalk. So if you look down on the south side of the road along Old Dominion, you also have pink, or I should say magenta, because that's how I've got it labeled here. That whole area will be a 6-foot curb abutted sidewalk. And again, the reason for that is to minimize impacts to adjacent property owners. Some of the houses at the realigned intersection over here to the east are a lot closer to the road. And then we have a bunch of trees and stuff that we wanted to minimize impacts to. The cyan walkways adjacent to the roadway are going to have a buffer, which is either 3 or 4 foot wide. What we propose to do there is, if there's an area where we can minimize impacts to properties or trees, then we might slide that walkway in a little bit to try to prevent impacts. In front of the newly developed Murr Farms, I believe it is, and the existing church, there is an 8-foot asphalt walkway. So what we propose to do is tie in on the north or west side and to the northeast or south side and maintain as much of that trail as physically possible. Now, there's no guarantee that we will be able to not impact that trail. During the complete and final design phase, we will figure out more detail, but the plan currently is to maintain that trail so that we don't have to tear it out and rebuild it. Then the final section of roadway is the southern realigned portion of Balls Hill and then running back to Van Ness Court. And that will be basically your same typical section where you have your 3 to 4 foot buffer. In this general area at the intersection, we are going to have a proposed stormwater management pond. So through there, we will have the wide 4 foot buffer all the way through. And then on the other side, up on the north side of Old Dominion, there's a possibility that we would slide the walkway in a little bit to minimize impacts. That's why we say 3 to 4 foot buffer here. So from looking at the traffic analysis in 2018 and moving forward, we had Kimley Horn do traffic analysis, and as everybody that drives out there knows, this intersection there's a lot of congestion out there, and that falls into what we call a level of service F. So the intersection fails. What that means is there's way more traffic than the capacity of the roadway. Results in very long delays, people sitting at the lights through multiple cycles. When the roadway is built and constructed and the new 2 signalized intersections are realigned, what we will get is a level of service B. And what that means is reasonable flow. Now, somebody would probably ask, what does reasonable flow mean to one person versus another person? So I think the best way to put reasonable flow is we can anticipate that traffic will only have to sit through 1 cycle of light. That's not a guarantee that every single time you drove through this intersection, you won't have to hit 2 cycles of lights. But generally speaking, you will only have to hit 1 cycle of light. So what that means is in 2045, if we did not do anything, and then in 2045, if we did do anything, the difference in time that people would anticipate sitting at this intersection is reduced in the morning by about 2 minutes and in the evenings by about 3 minutes. So there's a significant reduction of delay through this intersection. So if we didn't do anything, it would only get worse. And if we do this proposed alignment, it will get severely better. It'll be a lot better. So then we'll roll into the estimated land rates. So when we do any project, not any, but most every project, one of the things that we need to do is require land rights. So that's where the county works with the property owners in order to access their property and acquire portions of that property for the project. On this project, we have already purchased 2 parcels, and I'll just flip back real quick. If you can see the screen over on the far left, there were 2 parcels right here that the county has already purchased. They did that a couple of years ago. So there will be no more total acquisitions of parcels. The 2 parcels have already been purchased by FCDOT. And then of the rest of the project, there are going to be 12 parcels where we will need right-of-way dedication, 11 parcels where we'll need permanent easement, and 31 parcels where we will need temporary grading easement. There will be a total of 34 parcels impacted. Now the math here, if you look at it, doesn't add up, but that's because there's overlaps. So there might be some parcels that we need permanent easement and some that we need temporary easement, but we might not need that for both of them. So again, 34 total parcels will be impacted on this. I think it's important to note the difference in right-of-way and permanent easement. Most of the permanent easement on this job is going to be for utilities. When we relocate utility poles or water line or gas line or something like that, if it's relocated outside of the right-of-way, we will need permanent easement. And I believe on this job, the electric poles are going to need some permanent easement. So most of that is permanent easement. The right-of-way dedication, where we need right-of-way dedication, is if the proposed sidewalk or the roadway improvement itself is on what is currently existing private property, not in right-of-way. At that point, we would need to acquire right-of-way for the project. That will be, as we progress the plans forward, the parcels that will be impacted will be, the individuals that have parcels that are impacted will be reached out to by county staff, and we will explain the process a little bit further at that time to those individuals. Another impact that is going to be part of this project and is with most every construction project is tree impacts. The construction for this job, both for the roadway and for the sidewalk, will impact some trees. There are approximately 25 parcels where trees will be impacted. It's important to note that some of the trees that are impacted are going to be in existing right-of-way. Some of those trees are going to be in what's an existing public street easement, and some of those trees will be on private property. There is a difference as to how we handle those during the land acquisition process, and that will be discussed a little bit more with the actual private property owners as we get further along in the design process. So then utilities, for those of you that can see the screen, if you look at this picture, there's a lot of utilities out here. It's not very easy to read, and that's kind of the purpose behind this, is to say that there are a lot of utilities out there, and most of them will need to be relocated. So we have water line throughout the job that will be impacted by the road, so we'll need to relocate some water line, and that is shown in blue. We will have some sanitary sewer that needs to be relocated. That doesn't show on this particular area. Washington Gas, so your private gas line is shown in yellow. We will have some relocation that's necessary for that. Dominion Power, the electric poles that are out there, we will have a lot of electric relocation. As a matter of fact, we are estimating 25 poles to be relocated as of the current design, and 32 poles are impacted. That doesn't mean that you're going to have a total of 57 poles impacted. What that means is you'll have a pole relocation is when the pole is moved from point A to point B. Pole impact is when you have a line that goes from a pole that has been relocated and ties back to the next pole. So we're not relocating that pole, but we are moving the line to reconnect it. So that's why we have a few more impacted than we do have relocation. So there'll be 7 additional poles that aren't relocated that have some impacts, and that's an estimate, of course. And then we also have communications. One of the important things to note here is that there are a lot of utility relocations, and that will come up again here in a minute. So as we look at the schedule, the construction, the anticipated schedule for design and construction. So we are having our community meeting now. We are going to give the public 30 days, or we're requesting a 30-day period where comments are received. At that point, we will tabulate the comments, and then we will go into the design process based on the comments. We might make some reviews to the plans. So we're going to go into the design process. We had started the design back a year ago or so, and we had got to a point in that design process. We had an 8-foot asphalt walkway. Now we're reducing the width of the walkway to minimize impacts to trees and properties. So we have taken a step back. So we had plans that got up to about 30%, and then we realized that we needed to come back and hone in the property impacts a little bit because there was a significant amount. So we are now going back through the design phase after we have this public meeting. And then the way that works is we'll design it, we submit to VDOT. VDOT owns the roads. Fairfax County does not own the roadways, so we have to work with VDOT to get approval for plans. When the plans get reviewed and approved, that's a process. There's a couple of different submittals. We'll go through an intermediate, a pre-final, a final, and depending on how complex the job is, there might be a couple of ultimate finals. So that'll take a little bit of time, and then the land acquisition process comes into play. When we get the plans almost done to where we're pretty sure that there's going to be minimal changes, then we start the land acquisition process. We create plats, and then we have our right-of-way agents reach out to the property owners and they start talking about land acquisition. Once we get land acquisition, then we can go into utility relocation. And as I had mentioned on the previous slide, there are a lot of utilities in this area. And it's important to note that there are a lot of utilities in this area because we estimate that it's going to take 24 months to relocate all those utilities. And that is a long time. And the reason that is a long time is because of those 25 poles that we just talked about, you have multiple utility owners on those poles. So Dominion will have to go out, they'll have to relocate the utility poles, then, or they'll have to go out and put new utility poles out in the ground, and then they have to move their electric lines. And then when they're done, they tell the next utility owner, let's say cable is out on those poles, then the cable company comes out, they move their lines. Then when they're done, the telephone line is in, the telephone company is informed, so the telephone company comes out and moves. So it's a process that takes a considerable amount of time. And some of those poles are located right now where we would need to put roadway stuff, sidewalks or whatever. So all that stuff has to be out of the way before we can begin construction. So that's where the construction date is considerably far out. It's 5 years out. So just know the reason that that is so far out is because we have to go through a progression of steps before we can get to construction. Again, the utility begins after land acquisition is complete. And then, as I'm sure everybody knows, the construction schedule is also the length of the schedule. So from spring 27 to fall 28, we have incorporated supply chain demands in that. So if things get fixed and ironed out by then hopefully this length of time will shorten. But we don't see any shortening beyond that other than the utilities. If we can get the utilities to move quicker than 2 years, then we might be able to start construction a little bit sooner. So then that rolls into the questions portion. So we will, there are a couple of different ways to answer questions here. So I'm going to run through this part of it. So if, all right, so here's the instructions. First, you need to raise your hand, located at the top of your screen, next to the 3 dots. We have somebody that will enable your microphone once you've been called on, and you're called to ask your questions. Then once you finish asking your question, please lower your hand, and you do that the same as you did by raising it, just by clicking that the hand. And then you will need to unmute yourself when your name is called. Then you can ask your question, and then please mute yourself after you've asked your question. And then for the people that are on the phone, again, so if you're on the phone, please press the star and 5 to raise your hand. And then when your phone number is called, please press 6 to unmute. So I think we are ready for questions. So Robin, do you have?
I think it's actually star 6 to unmute. Star 5 to raise their hand, and
Correct.
Star 6 to unmute.
Thank you, Tom. Star 5 to unmute, star 6, or sorry, star 5 to raise your hand, star 6 to unmute. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so do we
Hey, I'm Robin. Hey, I see that we do have YAK. So if you will unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. Hi, this is Yusuf Capra on Ernestine Street. Thanks for holding this meeting. Question: since we were just talking about utilities, why not bury the utilities rather than use poles at this complicated intersection? Thanks very much.
Yeah, so I will start with that, and then if anybody else wants to chime in. So when you underground utilities, you add an extensive amount of money and an extensive amount of time to the project. You can usually add a year or more before the project gets started. So that's why we haven't looked at utility undergrounding. Does anybody else, Todd or Tom, want to add to that?
Yeah, this is Todd Minix, Chief of Transportation Design. If you go back to the slide with the utilities on it, just for example, most of what you see there is underground already, other than the overhead power lines, which it's very difficult to see. There is some communication and cable on the overhead, but there's a significant amount of that you see in that photo that's actually underground already. Jared did mention it's very, very expensive. If you're familiar with the undergrounding we did in downtown McLean, at Old Dominion, and gosh, can't think of the name off the top of my head, that we did several years, probably 8 years ago now.
Chain Bridge.
Chain Bridge.
Todd.
Chain Bridge in Old Dominion. We did about, I want to say about 1,300 feet, about a quarter mile of utility undergrounding there. That was primarily Dominion only. For the most part, that was well over $3 million for a quarter mile. So it gets very expensive very quickly to do that. And it doesn't eliminate all the above ground facilities. They still have to have transformers, switches, and so forth that are above ground. So.
Okay, thank you, Todd. All right, now we have Bob. Bob, if you would unmute yourself and ask your question.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I really appreciate this plan. I think it makes a lot of sense. I've owned a home on Forestwood Drive for over 40 years. I've put up with all that traffic both ways on Old Dominion and at the intersection. What I really am disappointed to not see here, though, is this is an opportunity to make McLean more walkable. And by that, I mean the north side of Old Dominion, from where you currently have it stopping, all the way down to Ernestine, where, as you know, there is a walkway on the other side of Ernestine. It is very dangerous for those of us who live on the north side to walk to places like the community center or Churchill Road without a walkway. And I'm not asking for something really fancy. I just don't see why we can't put some sort of an asphalt walkway the whole way from Balls Hill to Ernestine, so that we would have walkable community, safe walkable community. Is there a reason why you have not included that?
So we did look at including additional walkways throughout the project, and that was an area that we looked at. The main reason at this point that we did not add it is project funding. The project currently is a little bit over budget because of the current inflation that we're seeing. So in order to get something, we tried to fit within as close to budget as possible. So that's why we didn't add sidewalks. There were two areas that people are really asking questions about, and it's the one you mentioned and then the one down Balls Hill southbound. But again, funding limits us to do what we can do now. That doesn't mean that we won't look at it in the future. It just means we don't have funding right now for it.
Thank you.
And then I would say, Tom or Todd, do you have anything in addition to add to that?
No, Jared, I think you covered it.
Yep.
There's a lot of gaps in our pedestrian network throughout the county, and we would like to address as many of those as possible, but what Jared has described is what we can afford to do with this particular project.
Okay, thank you, Tom and Jared. Next we have Parvinder, and if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
thanks.
All right, great. Yeah, I want to start off by thanking you guys for holding this forum. I think this project in the long term definitely is going to be great for the communities in this area. I do want to address a couple of things. One is, as part of the Mayor Farms community, which will probably be impacted, overall the most, we do support the current plan, the Plan A that you guys have talked about during the meeting. So that's out of the different options, this is the plan we support the most. The other thing I wanted to ask was specific to personal property that you had mentioned. How much intrusion should we expect into personal property, on the road, like on Balls Hill and on Old Dominion, specifically since my address is 7198. It's right the front house on the Mayor Forest Farm community. So wanted to get an idea what you guys anticipate going forward for that.
So right now we're at a preliminary plan point. So we can't specifically say this or that much is what we would impact, but I can say currently the way we are looking at the project is we're trying to keep the existing trail that's in front of your property. Mm-hmm. So that would minimize the impacts. If we keep that trail, we would need to do minimal impacts to your property. Are you right at the corner? Do you abut Grayson Woods? Is that?
Yeah. So I'm 7198. So Grayson Woods is the street that our address is on. Yes.
Okay. So the what I'm seeing here is there would be a little bit of temporary grading and construction easement. And again, I have to note that this is not final design. We're in preliminary design. So there would be a little bit of grading easement that would allow us to build, improve handicap ramps is what we're looking at right now. Do you plan on attending the in-person meeting?
Yeah, I'll be there next week. And what's the obligation?
We will have plan sheets.
Okay.
So if you want, make sure you come up and ask us, and we can walk over and kind of walk you through what we're looking at. And Todd, I see you jumped in here.
Yeah, I think that the major impact, if any, to your property is going to be where the relocated utility poles go in that area. And if that particular pole right there near the corner of the entrance has to move, and how far it has to move. And that we won't know that until we are a little further along in the design and we get the proposed designs from Dominion Power as to where they would like to relocate them. We do work with the utility companies to try to shift poles around to minimize impacts and so forth. But I think that's probably your biggest concern is where that's going to go.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Our next question comes from Shora. I think that's right. And if you could unmute yourself. Let's see. Okay. Let me try. Okay, Shora, can you unmute yourself now? Let's see. Okay, we will come back and try again. All right, let's see. Our next question, we will come back and try you again, Shara. Our next, let's see. Okay, I don't see any other questions unless Parvinder has another one. And now I see.
I do not.
Okay, Okay, thank you. Okay, I just have an initial P. If you could unmute yourself. Let's see. Okay, let's try P again with the initial P. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I plan to attend the meeting in person, but I wanted to ask a question as far as acquisition of, if any, of associated properties with this construction. I live on at 1207 Balls Hill Road. And from the outlines of the project, it seems that there would be probably the most impact to our three homes here at the corner of Balls Hill Road and the Old Dominion Fork. Can you speak maybe today or in-person meeting as to any attempts of the, if necessary, land acquisitions and impact that this project will have? And I'm not talking here about easements needed for the project completion. I'm talking about permanent acquisitions of land.
So the permanent acquisition of land that the county has already done is the only full acquisition of land that we're taking. Are you talking about that, or are you talking about right-of-way acquisition?
The right-of-way.
Okay. Can you? I don't have addresses memorized. So are you at where the southern portion southbound relocated Balls Hill?
Yes, right at that corner of 1207 Old Dominion, a little bit north of Greystone Road.
Oh, okay. So you're on the north side
that
of the road?
That extended proposed driveway that I see on the project.
Okay, so the S-shaped purple driveway?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, we're at preliminary plans, but your property line is set back a considerable distance. So there will not, as of right now, there is no proposed right-of-way take on your property.
Okay.
The only thing that we're showing currently is temporary construction easement to reconstruct the driveway.
Thank you.
That again, as Todd had mentioned, and I don't know exactly where utilities are going, so there could be some utility easement, but we are not showing any proposed right-of-way take or acquisition, I guess I should say. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our next question comes from Richard. And Richard, if you would unmute your microphone. Hi, Richard.
Good evening. Thanks for the information. Appreciate it. Could I get you to pull up the map that shows where Balls Hill coming from Lewinsville makes the intersection, and where you've made the excuse me, where you've made the current acquisition on the reservoir pond you're talking about? There you go. So for residents that live on Balls Hill Road on this section, if we're turning right turn into downtown McLean, today, in the way that it appears from this construction, there's no second lane that would allow a right-hand turn to have to wait as the cars back up that are taking the left-hand turn to go. And so the question is given you own the property there, is it possible to expand the right-hand turn portion so that in fact there's a double lane, so that in fact the right-hand turn going into downtown McLean doesn't have to wait at the light necessarily and would be able to take a right turn on red?
So originally when we looked at this, it does not meet the warrant for a right turn lane. However, we are going to reanalyze and reassess that. So I don't know the ultimate answer to that, but we are going to look into that.
Yeah, the amount of traffic that does back up, because when you have Little Langley School do its release, and in evening times when Google Maps or Waze diverts individuals to come down Balls Hill down Balls Hill Road is pretty significant, and that the backup that comes extends pretty significant distances down Balls Hill Road, and it's gotten significantly worse since 2018. I would say, even 3 to 5 times worse. I live off of Springside Way, and the traffic backs up all the way back to Little Langley School. And so the ability to not be able to make a right-hand turn for as long of a distance is just, again, just would ask that be evaluated, because there's a significant wait time if you have to take a right-hand turn for all the traffic that wants to take left.
Okay,
Thanks.
I see Andy, our traffic analyst here. Let's let him jump in. And
Sure. No, I think that's a great point. I think when we typically analyze these intersections, we first started with the proposed preferred alternative, which had a single lane for that approach. We found that when we analyzed this approach in a little bit more detail, again, to help aid with the design of this project, we found that queuing was significantly decreased due to the enhanced, basically the amount of vehicles moving through the 2 new intersections was significantly less congested. So we found that the queuing for that approach that you speak of, which is the northbound Balls Hill Road approach, is actually going to be significantly less. And so even with a single lane, drivers would experience less delay when trying to make that right turn. That being said, I think Jared mentioned this, and it's a good point. Usually we don't want to over-design roads and put in turn lanes where they aren't necessarily needed. More lanes obviously is more capacity, but we can't do that in every case. But in this case, especially when you talk about right-of-way costs and other impacts, but Jared had mentioned, we will take a look at that. As you had mentioned, that's part of the property that the county owns now. So we will evaluate that.
Thanks.
thanks, Andy.
All right, thank you, Richard. Okay. Our next question is from a phone caller. And if you could, I think you have unmuted. If you press *6, you'll be unmuted. Can we hear you? 703-854-1127. Oh, okay, I think we might have lost you there. Come back if you need to ask your question again. Our next question comes from Matthew. And Matthew, if you could unmute your microphone. Let's see. Okay, Matthew, could you unmute your microphone? Okay, it doesn't seem to be unmuting. Let's try again there. Okay. Matthew, we may try to come back to you. Let me see if we have. Let's go back to our phone caller, and if you could press *6 to unmute your microphone on your phone. Okay, let's see. Phone caller.
Hello?
Hey, there you go. We can hear you.
Oh, good.
Thank
About
you.
5
Sorry.
times. I'm on Balls Hill past Matthew Mills, and I had a follow-up question on, I'm a candidate for you to buy land, looking at your aerial map. And so I was wondering, as you get further along in the design process, whether you can make considerations as far as the configuration of the sidewalk down there, because as I understood you, and you kind of went a little bit rapidly through that, as I understand it, from Matthew Mills down to Churchill, you're not going to have that curb. And on my property, which is 1117, you're coming in over the existing right-of-way. And I wondered if you had a curbed sidewalk there, whether you would be closer to the road, which would minimize the amount of foliage that you'll be taking out.
Yep. So, Ms. Meyer, I believe we've spoke about this specifically, and yes, this is an area that we will reevaluate to see if the addition of curb and gutter can pull the sidewalk in so that we are not acquiring right away from your property.
Right, and I wondered. It doesn't sound like you're far enough along to really know that, but I would hope that as you're proceeding with the design process, that you'll think about that for all the properties on Balls Hill where you're actually proposing to go over the existing right of way. And the other thing I wondered if you could just touch upon is the movement and the relocation of the utilities, and how much excavation should all the property owners expect with that? Will you be just shortening your lines, or will you actually have to move utilities from the house out?
So each individual property is going to be different, obviously.
Well, I could give you an example, like your water. My water meter is out towards the street. So if you had to move that to put in the sidewalk, I guess my question would be, would you have to excavate that whole front yard and all the piping, or would you be just shortening that pipe and moving that meter?
Okay, I see Todd here, so Todd.
And that would be a question really,
Yeah.
I think, for all the homeowners would like to know.
Typically, for example, in your example of the water main, if the water meter needs to be moved, we would move, in this particular case, the water meter might move to the back side of the sidewalk between your house and the sidewalk, as close to the sidewalk as possible. There wouldn't need to be hardly any excavation beyond that point. It's just a matter of tying your existing pipe into that new meter, and that would be done by our contractor. In the case of gas lines, that can be a little tricky. Depending on how old the gas main is that is serving your home, if the
gas line, as I understand it,
yes,
is actually PVC.
Right.
And
if
I
it's,
had 2 years ago, I had a water main rupture. So that whole pipe, the water pipe, had to be replaced. And
Right.
Washington Gas could not find where that gas pipe was.
Right. That's depending on what the material is of the existing gas main feeding your home is.
Right.
If it's old and out of date and not the standard, they will replace that service line all the way to the meter against your house. Unfortunately, that means they're digging up your yard
The whole
from
front yard.
the whole front yard. It's a trench. It's not tearing up the entire yard. It's a trench to lay that new line. And again, that's to take these old, 20, 30-year-old pipes that are not up to current code and standard and bringing them up to code. So you got a safer facility and a newer one as well. Water mains are not quite that way. Water mains from the meter to your home is the homeowner's responsibility. In case you didn't know. Right.
The water, I understand, because I've had that replaced 2 years,
Yes.
the whole line.
Right.
And that's
So
why I
we
was asking.
would just tie back into that new line that you have as quickly as possible from where the new meter goes.
Okay.
And almost all the new service lines that we put in, I don't know of any that we put in that aren't copper. In the years I've been with Fairfax County DOT.
No, mine's copper, so that's not a problem. For the
Okay.
land acquisitions, upon request, just for the ones where you've got proposed land acquisition, do you think that you could, as you get closer to a finalized design, that you could actually come out for the land acquisitions and stake where you want that proposed right-of-way to give homeowners an idea of how far you'd come in?
Yes, we do that all the time.
Okay,
That's done during the negotiations of the land rights in terms of we do appraisals, title searches, all this kind of stuff. It's
exact
almost
square
like buying a
footage and
property, right?
everything.
It
Yeah,
gets you a plat of the actual taking, it gets recorded in the land records. And again, we go through a negotiation on what's the value of that land, and we compensate you for it appropriately. Of course, if we're buying permanent land rights or right of way, that has a higher value than a temporary easement. But for a temporary easement is basically we're renting the property for some duration.
yeah, according to the map, that's not what you've got proposed, but no, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna just quickly go up and see. Matthew, I wanted to give you a chance to unmute your microphone if you can. Try one more time here. Okay. We'll come back to you and try again. Now our next question is from Michelle. Michelle, if you could unmute your microphone.
Yes, I do want to express our sincere appreciation to Fairfax County for such a thorough analysis. That's a lot of great work that you guys have been doing. Thank you so much. And we're from the Mayor Farm community. We're a new community. We really appreciate that our entire community is not being disturbed too much. And in fact, the front two houses, if they can be left untouched, that would be so awesome. And if you can take that into consideration, we paid a lot of money for that property. So we sure appreciate for your consideration, number one. So minimum disruption is certainly appreciated. And number two, and we want to make sure we can make sure that Fairfax County has some signs both ways to say that do not block the intersection, because we currently have a lot of problem getting in and out of the community with such hazard. Actually, it really is a hazard. So if you would make sure that sign is taken into your consideration, that would be awesome, because we're often blocked and couldn't make a left or right. It's actually impossible to get out of our community. So we really appreciate it. I do think our community think that among all of your proposal, the 2T, like you're presenting, is the best alternative, thinking down for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I do agree with the previous caller. If we can have some walkable way to go down to downtown McLean, it's so awesome. I think we pay enough taxes. Hopefully that there's some money that you can find somewhere, even from Mayor Farm to go to the McLean playground is such a hazard. Trying to push a stroller down that way, you're risking your life. So I ask the community committee humbly if you can take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know if Andy, do you want to talk about maybe the traffic flow and how we've moved the intersection a little bit further from there and how it could help or will help?
Sure. You know, I'm sure as anybody, especially you being right at the intersection now, when that newer community was developed, you know, that tie-in is right at the stop bar for the northbound Old Dominion approach. So once you have 1 to 2 vehicles that start to queue up at that intersection, that's when you start to see blockages there. And we all know that there's frequently during the peak periods, far more than 1 to 2 vehicles that will stack up at that location. So the good news is with these, with the proposed plan for this area, since we're separating the 2 intersections, the intersection, the signals itself, the north signal is moving to about 400 feet north of Grayson Woods Lane. The south signal is moving obviously to the south. but you've got a lot more space for vehicles to stack before they start to block that Graysonwood lane. And our analysis showed that in 2045, during normal peak conditions, you can never guarantee that there won't be some extraordinary situation where queues will back up a little bit farther. But under normal conditions, during those AM and PM peaks, the queues are not expected to, I've got the data right here, the queues are not expected to reach more than 125, 150 feet approximately, which would be plenty of stacking space before hitting the Graysonwoods lane.
Thank you, Andy.
And again, that's just due to the much more efficient operation of vehicles through the area.
Appreciate that. Okay, Robin.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, our next question will come from a caller, 404-834-651. If you could unmute your microphone or press *6, sorry, to unmute. Oh, okay, let's see. I think the caller dropped there. So let's go to caller. Can you hear me?
You're back.
Yes, yes.
Hey.
Yes, I've trying to unmute myself before when you called on me, but it didn't work. So I'm now calling instead of online.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for taking the call. Our house is on 7140, which is next to the Korean church, where the long driveway connects us to Old Dominion. It seems to me that one of the houses that is most impacted is ours, because it looks like the traffic light is coming right in front of our driveway. I am very concerned about the use of that driveway, which is a private driveway, as people come to the light and they will come in there and they will try to U-turn or whatever it is when they realize that this is not ending anywhere except a house. The signs around that area is concerning me. So there's a lot that I'm worried about. How do we get in and out of our house? Even now, as your previous caller said, coming out to Old Dominion and turning, right or left is difficult and dangerous. And I'm wondering about how all of this is going to be designed, because, the traffic light is going to end up right in front of our driveway. So if you could explain some of this and keep that in the design that really looks at the driveway of that house as well as the use of it for the church, that would be wonderful. Okay.
So Andy, do you want to kind of walk through the phasing of the signal there so she might get a better idea of what's going to happen?
Sure, I can walk through that. So the signal, the new intersection that's going to be created there actually connects in with the church. So as far as maybe driver confusion about going to the wrong location and using that as a U-turn, you're going to have a signal there, and you're going to be able to clearly see that is the church parking lot. There's a through left or a shared through and left lane for southbound Old Dominion Drive, and that is just off to the left there of the cursor. So making that turn, I don't think that there will be as much confusion about where that driveway is in this case. Depending on what VDOT says, again, VDOT is going to be the ultimate owner of this road. So typically they do not put signage on the actual signal pole itself for the private approaches to signals. So in this case, they may not be able to put church driveway as with an actual street name sign on the signal, but there's potential there. We've certainly seen it done before. So, but I would say for the most part that typically is not the case with VDOT signals and private driveways. As far as the signal operations, again, we mentioned here that because Old Dominion Drive is now operating as the main approach for both of these two intersections, you're going to see a lot more efficient travel along Old Dominion Drive, and so queuing will be reduced. Even before, when the signal was further to the north, you would frequently have queuing that would block, that would go well beyond the intersection and much farther south during its worst periods. But the intersection is going to operate a lot more smoothly now with the two signalized intersections with Balls Hill abutting as a side street.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for calling in. We appreciate that. Okay. All right. Our next question comes from another caller, and the phone number is 703-625-7214. I'm sorry, yeah, 7214. If you could press *6 to unmute your microphone. Hey there. Let's see. It looks like you're unmuted. Can you?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is Matthew M. I had the same problem. I was banging on the unmute button, but it didn't unmute me online. So I called it. So I'm the trustee of my dad's property, which is 7167 Old Dominion. And I have two questions. One, there's a retaining wall noted in the drawing that was distributed with the invitation. How high is that retaining wall? What's the drop from above grade to, I guess, the path?
So I don't know the specific height of the draining wall or the retaining wall, but I think during design we will be able to get rid of the retaining wall there. Really the main purpose for the retaining wall is the property next to you. There is a septic field right here, and we need to stay off of that septic field. So I don't think we will need the retaining wall to go all the way down as it's shown. I think we can stop it before it even gets to your property.
Okay. And then there's a proposed storm drain easement. What does that storm drain look like? Is that a buried concrete pipe, or is that an open ditch? Is it gravel? What's the look?
Yeah, so it right now it is proposed as an open ditch. So I'm sure you're aware that the drainage from your property drains towards the road. So we would collect that water before it runs to the road and tie it into storm drainage off of your property. So it would be an open ditch across your property.
Like an open concrete line ditch?
No. I don't think there's that much water. I think it would just be a grass lined swale, if you will. I see Todd jumping in. You want to?
Yeah, there is a pipe under your driveway. The purple is the reconstruction of the driveway, and there's a pipe underneath it right there near the end. The retaining wall is also there to try to limit some of the tree impacts. You can see a lot of orange X's on the screen. Those are trees that would definitely be gone even with the retaining wall. If we take out the retaining wall, again, that ditch may be further back, and the slopes from that ditch may end up taking out more trees. So that's something we'll work with you on in terms of, do we keep the wall or do we get rid of it? And keeping in mind that you may lose more trees by getting rid of the wall.
Right. No, and I guess the retaining wall is not objectionable as long as it's not, 6 feet or something scary.
I can't imagine it would be more than 2 feet.
Yeah. As I recall, it's something like maybe 2-3 feet tall max. Depending on how tall it is, if it's over 30 inches tall from the top of the wall down to the sidewalk, then there has to be a railing along the top of it to meet code. So that's another thing to think about as well.
Got it. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And thanks for your time and patience late in the evening to listen to our questions and concerns.
And thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. It looks like we do not have any more questions, but if somebody wants to ask a last minute question, please feel free to do so. And Jared, if you want to wrap up or let everybody know, how to
Okay.
comment, that'd be.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. So just as a reminder, our comment section or our comment period is until July 29th. If you go to the project website, which is www.fairfaxcounty.gov/projects/balls-hill-road. And at the very bottom of that page, there is a red feedback button. So if you click the contact the project team, it'll pop up an email and you can submit feedback through that feedback there. So this concludes the meeting on Balls Hill and Old Dominion intersection project. A recording of this meeting will be available on the project website the next day or so. We want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we really appreciate your time and participation. And with that, we will close the meeting. Thank you all.